Okay, project for the day. I have a set of standard size or inch size Forstner bits that I use quite a lot in my wood shop. And however, I've been using a lot of neodymium magnets in projects lately, and pretty much they're always in metric sizes, and I want the holes I make for the magnets to be the same size as the magnets, so I needed to get a metric set. This is just a set I bought on Amazon. They managed to pack all these into this little box, but now I can't remember how they all fit in there. I want to build a proper storage box for them. So, you know, what's a Forstner bit? That's what a Forstner bit is. It makes very clean holes in wood. Really better than any other kind of bit I'm familiar with. I don't really want to keep them in these little plastic containers, so I need to figure out a layout that'll work and put together a storage box. Okay, there's the set. It's 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26. Then it jumps to, I got it out of order. It doesn't have a 27 in here for some reason. Don't know why. 27 is missing, then 28. There's no 29. There's a 30. There's no 31. There's a 32, and then it jumps to 35. Now I also needed 10 millimeters, and so I bought this separate one. It's somewhat different style, but it's still a Forstner bit, and so I'm putting that down at the end as a special case. So it seems like organizing them in 2 rows like this, not counting the 10 millimeter guy, is going to be a good fit. They're not going to be laying down like this though, they're going to be standing in holes. The shanks are all the same and the same length, so I figure I'll just have a box with a raised platform and holes that these drop into, then I can just grab them and pull them out. So I need to work out the exact dimensions of the box that I need. Well, I mapped out a layout. It's going to be a very generous layout. They're not packed in together. I've got 24 through 35 here, and 15 through 23 here, and the 10 millimeter one is going to lay on its side here, and the box is going to be 5 3/4 inch by 10 inches X and Y dimensions. Now I have to figure out the height. And I've got my front elevation figured out with my hinge line. Case is going to be 4.5 inches tall, still 10 inches wide per the other diagram. I'm going to have a bit platform that sits up there. The bits will sit in there with their shafts resting on the bottom of the box. The bit body will sit just up above the bit platform instead of sitting right down on top of it. It might make it a little easier to grab it that way, I think. And the only reason I have such a tall top on it is, excuse me, because I need to have enough room above the hinge line for my hardware. And I'm probably going to put some foam of some sort inside the lid here that'll push down on these, so if I carry the case around and it knocks over, of course they're not really going anywhere, but still. And I'm considering putting a another plate down here on the bottom for the ends of the shafts to sit in. I'm not really sure that's necessary, but it might be a good thing to do. I have to go tomorrow and buy some plywood. I'm out of craft plywood. I need some 1/4 inch, which comes in 12 by 24 sheets at the hardware store. So for both the metric Forstner bit case, I've got it mapped out where the panels are coming from, and that overflows to the second sheet, and then the tap carrier, the tap tray The base is here and the sides are up here, and then the diagonal divider is in 2 sections there, and there's going to be a few more little bits up in this area for the dividers, the vertical dividers, so it'll just fit pretty nicely on those 2 sheets. So I've got a couple of sheets of 1/4 inch 12 by 24 here, craft plywood. This brand that the Ace Hardware sells has been very good in the past, but lately I've found a lot of them that just aren't completely flat. I picked through them, and this one is nice and flat, but this one's got a bit of a cant to it. I'm thinking that on individual pieces it won't be that noticeable that I cut out of it, but especially the one for the taps I'm going to make out of this sheet here, just because it's going to be more critical with the smaller size. And there's the first board marked up, and there's the other board marked up. And all the pieces for the Forstner Bit case are cut out. And then I'm going to use my router table to make the rabbet joints in the edges of the 2 sides and the front and the rear panel. Just a test fit of the rabbet joints. And then I used the same router settings to rabbet the entire top and bottom panels. And I think this is probably about ready to have a top and or bottom put on it. The glue is dried on the Forstner Bit case, the 4 sides. Now I have to put the top and bottom on. Alright, there's the top and there's the bottom. When I made my cuts earlier, I didn't go in deep enough. I forgot I had a 1/4 inch overlap instead of an 1/8 inch overlap, so I've fixed that. And there I'm gluing up the tops and the bottoms onto the Forstner Bit box. Okay, the glue is dried on the Forstner Bit box. And I think the next step is to give it a nice sanding. I've actually sanded it roughly on my big sander, but I'm going to put some finer paper on this and smooth it out just a little bit more. And now to cut the lid off. I've got the fence set for the 1 inch that the lid is, and I built in a sacrificial 3/32 for the blade. So let's get at it. And that came out pretty well. My design for the box calls for a shaft tray that will have holes in it to support the bottoms of the Forstner Bit shafts. And that drops in there pretty nice. And then an upper bit platform, that's the one that you'll see. And those also go in there pretty nice, so the fit is good. Over the 2 trays, I've laid my pattern and used my metal center punch a few times in place of an awl to leave drill marks for all the holes. And they need to go through both layers, both trays. I also marked the corners of the 10mm bit cut out. And I've got pilot holes drilled through both of them, so now they don't have to be taped together anymore for subsequent drilling. Drilling one of the trays. Okay, both trays are drilled and sanded, and I have to put this little platform under here to support the bit that's going to be in there, and then I can start assembling this inner frame. And there's that on there. I've got to scooch this ever so slightly forward, like that. That's good. I want to make sure that it doesn't hit this inner frame. So that's about right. I'm going to assemble this inner box, which is something I can lift out if I want to change the design on this without having to redo the whole box. And since I'm going to be gluing it in place in here, I've lined it with wax paper, so hopefully any seeping glue won't, unfortunately, glue the inner part to the outer part. Hopefully that'll work. There's the lower tray dropped in. Okay, that's in there. I've got a couple popsicle sticks wedged in there to take up the small amount of clearance. I've also put these little screws in here so when I was positioning these I had something to grab onto. And I'll probably take those out even though they'll be invisible once I assemble the rest of the box. I want to let this dry just a little bit. I actually put epoxy on these two long edges so it'll dry quicker, and then that'll help hold it together while I take this other stuff out of here. And probably wait about 15 minutes and then come back here and put the top on. I have to check and make sure that the shaft here isn't going to rub on this left panel. If it is, I get my Dremel tool out and hog out a little bit of wood there just to make sure. Looks like that guy fits in there just fine. I should probably do some other spot checks. Yeah, that looks like it'll all fit just fine. It's spaced out the way it is so I can have labels running through here. I could have made it a lot smaller, but I wanted room for the labels. Ready to put this guy in there. I did take out the screws, by the way. Ah, that wasn't too coordinated. There. Now this is a slightly warped piece, so I have to clamp it to make it sit down on the glue properly. Okay, that came out all right. Oops. Comes out like that. Goes back in. So I've got everything varnished, both the tap tray and the Forstner Bit box in its 3 pieces. And as usual, since it's the middle of the winter, I've got some heater fans going to keep the air above 70 degrees around here. And they've all been sanded and given their second coat of varnish. Yeah, I'm using my Brother P-Touch editor for their label maker. And I've got one of my labels designed. It's probably going to have the same problem I did with the long label for the taps. It's going to be distorted and I'm going to have to do some adjustments. Unfortunately, I have to waste that much tape to find out. But what can you do? Yep, sure enough, it's drifting. It's not. The further I go to the right, the further to the left the marks are, and the whole label's about 1/8 of an inch short, so I have to make some adjustments. Yeah, that's lining up a lot better now. They're pretty good. So that's 1 out of 2. Alright. This time I made some preemptive adjustments to the positions towards the right side. We'll see how it comes out. Okay, let's see how these guys line up. Yeah, they're already kind of... Actually, the ones I adjusted are pretty good. It's the ones in the middle that need more adjustment. Yeah, that looks a lot better. So there's the label, or the two labels put on. And everything fits in there very nicely. It is a generously sized box, as I mentioned before. But I wanted to have plenty of room around them to grab. I wanted to have plenty of room for the labels. So there it is. Now to put the hardware on the outer box. And the hinges. Great big luggage style hinges, or at least like attaché case style hinges. That's what I had laying around. So now for the latch. And there's the latch. Yep, the screws don't stick through. I had the screws just long enough to just make it to the inside of the wood without quite going through, so they won't bind up on anything. And these are self-limiting hinges too, so they won't open up any more than that. Ta-da! Now all I have to do is put a piece of foam in here. Not strictly necessary, but I think I'd like to have some on there to help hold these down. And it's really only slightly more than the depth of this that I need to make it. I gotta look through my foam collection. Well, I hacked a little piece out of my stock of polyethylene closed cell foam that I mostly use for padding custom instrument cases I build, for musical instruments that is. And this is way too thick. It's about 2 inches thick or something. I'm gonna have to cut it down to 3/4 inch, but I don't have anything thinner. Okay, I've cut one cut this way laying flat on the bandsaw table, so I know I've got a right angle clean cut here, and now I can set it on that with the fence set to 3/4 inch and just resaw it like that. I just have to make sure I hold it as vertical as possible, and for that I'm going to get another triangle, sort of like this. And there we are. A nice clean piece of 3/4 inch thick. I've used some 3M 77 spray adhesive on the foam. I've never tried using that before on this kind of foam. It doesn't usually take to adhesives very well. I usually have to use something like Liquid Nails' strongest formula for it to stick decently. But since these are all sawn surfaces that I'm working on here, they're a bit more porous because I've opened up a lot of the normally closed cells in the foam. So I'm hoping that this works adequately. We will see. Okay, the foam fit in there real nice. The adhesive seems to be holding. I've glued this extra piece on here. And now I can go back in here and drop that in there. And it should just, yeah, it's exactly what I wanted. It resists just a little bit of compression on closing it. And that holds them really tight. They can't come out. Ideal. Now, I didn't show myself making this, but I also made a label to go on the outside, lest I get senile in my old age and forget what's in here. And I threw a set of cork feet on the bottom. And there we are. Project complete. And the other part of this is to organize my taps a little better. I've got some metric and some whatever you call them, American style. I forget the proper term. But everything from 440 up to 1024, quarter 20, and so on. And then a few metric sizes like 8mm by 1.25. And the largest one I have is a 3/8 by 16. Actually, I have a couple larger ones, but I keep those separately because they go with specific equipment. So I figured out the amount of room in my drawer that I have is 7 by 6.5, and assuming that I build a little tray with 1/4-inch plywood, sides and bottom, I figured out the dimensions and where the dividers have to go. There'll be dividers going up through here, and that should separate them and leave adequate room, even if I want to add another 1 or 2 taps to each compartment. And I have to go tomorrow and buy some plywood. I'm out of craft plywood. I need some 1/4-inch, which comes in 12 by 20. And I've got the side walls of the tap holder glued up here. And I've used the router on the base all the way around. Put a nice rabbet on there. And now it comes for the fine tuning part, because it probably won't drop in there just perfectly, but we'll see. Hey, it does. How about that? I actually did something right. That means I can glue that thing up. And the glue is dried on the bit tray, and I've sanded it. I just want to make sure before I go any further with this that it does fit into my drawer here, and it's a perfect fit. And there's my pattern fit inside. I just have to make some marks on here now. I've cut out my 2 angled dividers between the front and the back sections. Now I have to glue those in. I don't feel like waiting for the wood glue, so I'm going to use epoxy for this. And there, those are glued in. Now I have to make all the little dividers that go this way. I used my Brother P-Touch editor software to design a label with all the different tap sizes on it for a 1/2-inch tape, which is roughly the width of the wooden barrier between the upper and lower sections of the tap case. So I'm going to go and print it here. Well, it fits, and things are pretty well lined up, except it seems like some of these came out bold and some didn't. I have to go back and check that with the software, and I think I got to make a couple small positioning alterations. Okay, I remade the label, and now the text lines up alright. The problem it has is that it isn't precise on the length of the label, and the longer the label, the more that the dimensions tend to drift slightly. And this is a 6-inch label here, and that's why the ones towards the right tended to be a little bit off. And all I can do, actually I have to hold I marked where the positions of the last 3 here that were off, they all needed to be scooched to the right a little bit, and of course the actual positions they are correct in the software. So I actually end up holding this up in front of the picture of it on the screen, and then dragging the one on the screen till it matches up with the one that I'm holding over it. That's a little tricky, but it does work. I could not get the silly thing to make the text here and here the same size. It's some sort of glitch in the software that these guys here, it keeps wanting to turn them to a slightly smaller font, and then they really look dramatically different. But I've tried several things and nothing works, so this is just a tap box. It doesn't need to be beautiful. So this is really pretty much done except for the varnishing. I didn't do the cleanest job of epoxying there, but the varnish will cover that up, so I'm not too concerned about it. Otherwise it came out looking decent. Okay, I've got the label affixed to the center divider. And there they all are. And there we go. It's a perfect fit.